Alright, there it is. Alright. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا Huanying Layth, bienvenidos a todos people, Khush Amadid, Pakhair Ragle, and of course Swagatam. Right, so Sudaga Hussain, Zubair, Frowdy Frubbery, Wasif, Ahlan wa Sahlan Bikum, Zara, Ahlan wa Sahlan, Zafar, people, Shukran for tuning in. Remember the drill. Spread the fitan and fasad, people. Spread the love, I mean to say. Not the fitan and fasad, but the love, people. I'll give people maybe a minute or so to just, whoa. Look at that. Google just trying to tune in there. Let me just put that on silent. Don't want it going off. Especially with Google, imagine that. It just picks up some command and just starts opening some things, and that too on a live stream. That would make me go viral. Entrapment, people, entrapment. Let's wait till some people tune in. Whilst they do, I'll share with you guys, this is a guman. Guman is like your kind of like dhan, the Arabic word dhan, which means, I suppose you could say kind of thought, but it entraps kind of thought, conjecture, you know, when your mind, what's on your mind in that sense. And sometimes it can be used negatively as well, the term, but it doesn't have to be. Right, so that's John Elias. Right, so he says, "Kaun se shok kis havas ka nahi." Right, so I thought whilst people are tuning in, "Kaun se shok kis havas ka nahi, dil meri jaan tere bas ka nahi." Wow. So, "Kaun se shok kis havas ka nahi." Like, what passions, what desires. Shok is your kind of your desire, but havas is also your kind of sensual desires, if you like. So he says, "Kaun se shok kis havas ka nahi." And both of these words have Arabic origin, by the way. Dil meri jaan tere bas ka nahi. And that's one of his, it's a kind of lengthy poem of his that he begins. He says, "Hum kahan se chale hain aur kahan koi andaza pesh o pas ka nahi." That where have we set off from and where are we going, people? No idea, huh? No idea. Nami danam kuja raftam. No idea where I'm going. Right, so he says, "Mujhko khud se juda na hone do." This poem, this line is what I wanted to share with you. I mean, I've heard it before, but I've read it just recently again, and I thought, wow. He says, "Mujhko khud se juda na hone do." That don't separate me from yourself. One could argue from my own self, but he's saying actually from yourself. Baat ye hai, main apne bas ka nahi. Mujhko, like what he's saying is, don't separate me from yourself. The reality is this, that I'm incapable, like I can't handle myself. Like I'm not somebody that can handle my own self. But in Urdu, "Mujhko khud se juda na hone do. Baat ye hai, main apne bas ka nahi. Anyway, people, that's Guman from the legend John Ilya Sahib. Damat barakatuhu. Right, may Allah have mercy on him. Right, so let's begin today. Let's, first of all, now that people have tuned in, those of you just tuning in, click like, click share, people. And I suppose, first of all, I'd just like to begin by just covering briefly the tragedy of this Jum'ah gone, the New Zealand Christchurch shooting massacre. That may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost, may He grant the victims, the deceased, may He grant them an elevated maqam in Jannatul Firdaus, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant their families and loved ones ease. It's a shock, really. It's one of those things that you know, everybody kind of heard about it. They woke up to the news. Somebody really going off that hatred has driven him to that extent, and that and I take it there was a gang of them, a group of them, that they've strapped themselves, gone armed into a masjid, obviously done his homework, found the nearest masjid, must have checked up on Jum'ah timings, must have chosen Jum'ah because of it being a congregated scene, really. So turning up and then ruthlessly, emotionlessly going through and just really just tearing down people as he went past. It was so surreal. I mean, unfortunately, like many of you, I saw the video clips. They were initially, I think later on the media has taken them all down, but initially they were viral all over social media, and including some of the mainstream papers that shared them as well and then took them down. But his video, it seems almost just like a game. You know, it doesn't even seem real. He's just, and it's just taking them down. You can't, you know, no. In fact, when I first saw it, I actually, is that even real? Like, is that, like, it's being done so, in such a kind of robotic manner. But subhanallah, and then some of the tragedy stories as they emerge of the people, the lives of the victims emerge. Who were they? Some of them had come from different countries, struggled to get there. Some of them there with their families, some of them sheltering with their bodies, their little children, and taking the brunt of taking so many bullets to themselves to shelter their children. It was really soul piercing and kind of like, it was just tragic to see. Not one is the incident, but that hate can take somebody to that level, that no longer they have no sense of compassion. And the irony is, this is the irony. The irony is, some of these people would probably have more compassion towards a dog, right? And you should have compassion towards animals. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that some of this guy, the perpetrators, were maybe compassionate towards animals, and yet this is how they ruthlessly gunned down men, women, children, just ruthlessly, unarmed, you know, to them just in a state of worship. But it's, ya salam, I mean, this is the irony of the age, I think, subhanallah. You know, may Allah eliminate this hatred from the hearts of people. May He allow us to replace this disease with compassion. And it stems from, I hold the media to account. Because the media creates a hysteria. It creates a sense of, oh my God, they're invading, they're coming from here, they're immigrants everywhere, they're, you know. And if you look at, I saw somebody's post online that had several screenshots of the New Zealand papers in the weeks and months that preceded last week. And so many of the headlines were focused heavily in this particular picture that I saw on things like immigrants and Islamophobia, Islamic terrorists and extremists and Muslims taking over and they're doing this. And so I hold them equally responsible. I think that those people, seriously, that it is not enough that they just say, oh, that we're sorry. They should be taken to account, that these people should have to face trial, really, for what they played a role in creating a culture that facilitated mass murder. So it's a tragic note, and and I do commend the New Zealand Prime Minister, her role in the way she came about and confronted the tragedy, and the kind of comfort she provided to people. I think that was amazing of her. So I wish other world leaders would follow suit. Right. So that said, today I haven't caught up with the details, but I heard of some kind of terror attack, an Islamic terror attack in, I think, Netherlands. In the Netherlands, some kind of shooting. And I have to say, wallahi, in the last few days, it's only been since Friday, I've seen so much sympathy towards the Muslim sentiment facing Islamophobia on just generally the media, on social media. I've seen it over the past weekend, that I was actually thinking to myself, this sympathy, the tide kind of turning towards the table, or this sentiment turning towards the Muslims, is never, whenever this happens, God forbid, there is always some kind of a Muslim terrorist attack. And I remember, just from those of you that remember things like when the Muhammad Ali thing, when he had passed away, and this whole thing, and then so much sentiment positively towards Muslims, that lo and behold, there's this incident. And just today I heard that, there's this, Muslim terrorist and like I said, I don't have all the details. I've been quite preoccupied today, so I haven't caught up. But what I did read was he's allegedly of Turkish, I think, origin, and I thought to myself, ya salam, I had a feeling this was, I'm seriously, it's so it appears as just so orchestrated, this whole thing. And I'm not saying it necessarily has to be, it could just be nutcases, and there are unfortunately, several nutcases amongst Muslim communities. But I'm just saying, it feels, one can't help but assume that do sometimes, I don't know, some people just allow certain people to do certain things because it will be just conducive to kind of killing off all this sympathy, or are these people just really that bloody mentally, I don't know, that they do. But the world I seriously find myself at a shortage of words. That in a day and age that we are becoming more and more connected with one another, that we find hatred is taking its roots, even if it is within Muslims as well, and non-Muslims, regardless of race, creed, faith, community. Terror, hatred has no religion, people. That hatred, it doesn't matter if it's found in any race, ethnicity, religion, community, it has to be condemned. It has to be isolated and separated and hopefully countered, hopefully in a positive way. This is to stop people believing in God. They are just attacking the people of the books. I don't really think, I think that's a very simplistic, summary that it's to stop people believing in God. I think that the world is become, unfortunately, some parts of it. Some people are troubled souls. They like, what happens is we start to live in a bubble. And I think I said this once before, that I think there's an amazing side to this as well, that we can create these bubbles today, and we can create virtual worlds. Like, I start to follow certain things on social media. I reach out to people who only have... So let's say, for example, let me give you an example. Let's say you want to learn about fiqh. Now, fiqh is the Islamic study of how to practice Islam. Now, you want to enhance your understanding. Now, you could start following, like, let's say, tens of fiqh pages. You start watching YouTube that are only to do with fiqh. They're speaking about scholars. They're speaking about things like this. You now start to become a part of certain social or kind of groups, social media groups. You're on their pages. You join some WhatsApp groups. Now, you're getting daily things about... So, like, I'm on certain groups to do with scholars and Maliki fiqh. I will always be getting things about Maliki fiqh. Oh, there's a new book that's been published. There's a new, somebody's taken up a new text as part of his PhD or something. There's a new issue. So I'm seeing this every day. Then the algorithms of social media start to reinforce these things to you, because they see your traffic is kind of marginalized. So it's towards this thing. So you're getting more and more of it. And you're starting to talk to your friends about it. Your friends are talking back to you. Now, you see, you've created a little world. And it's a sustainable world. And one could argue that that's amazing, because the world will keep you, it'll keep you fresh with knowledge, with insight. So sometimes I'll open my WhatsApp and there's a new issue being discussed, and I'm like, oh wow. Or I'll see a new book that's been published. I'm like, oh wow, okay, so that book's been published. And on some other group, somebody's saying something. I might see, I'm into poetry. I'm on some poetry WhatsApp groups. I might read a poem today. I open YouTube, and YouTube shows me a different poem of, let's say, Ghalib or Mir or, John, Elia or somebody. And I'm like, oh wow. And you see, you're creating a bubble. Now, that bubble can be very useful in the sense that it enhances your learning, it enhances it gives you confidence to discover more and connect. The problem would be is if that bubble is one that is poisoned by toxicity of hate. If that bubble is one that contains a kind of hateful atmosphere, where everybody's hating on something, where everybody's reinforcing that, oh my God, this is happening. Like, let's say immigration. Oh my God, there's a new report today. They stopped 2 immigrants at the border. Oh my God, there was an immigrant got through and he broke into a shop. Oh my God, there's a, and somebody's sharing a statistic, and you're on your WhatsApp group and they're sharing statistics, and you're with your friends, and they see what happens is you think the whole world has kind of become immersed in that world, in that atmosphere. You think it's happening everywhere. But I mean, it's only on your YouTube channel and on your little WhatsApp groups, and the rest of the world is oblivious to it. But you see, in there, it's so powerful. And like I said, and that is so, if the atmosphere becomes immersed in toxic hate, the counter is, it could be one about compassion and love and humanity, and that's amazing if it is. But this is what happens, and this happens regardless of communities, of ethnicities, of religion, of language. They are just hateful people, unfortunately, in the world. May Allah seriously replace their hatred with love and compassion. The world is just, life is too short really to just be so bitter. But it's amazing, that they worry themselves with problems that are not even real problems, for them, or for not even real problems. They ain't real problem. I mean, there may be a little problem somewhere, but it's not a real major problem. So, ya salam. A bit of a sad start there, people. A bit of a somber start. But chalta hai. That, speaking of somber, I'd read was reading a bit of Daagh Dehlvi, the amazing poet, who's a contemporary of people like Amir, and he's one of the teachers of Allama Iqbal, actually. And he has this, where he speaking of somber, he has this line where he says that yehi soch kar e maut tujhe laga rakha hai. That it is with this thought in mind, O death, that we hold on to you. He says that yehi soch kar e maut tujhe laga rakha hai. Kaam aata hai bure waqt mein aana tera. That is like, whoa. He says that at times of calamity, your coming is actually a sense of relief. He says, that Kaam aata hai bure waqt mein aana tera. That's his famous, his ghazal that aise aane se to behtar tha na aana tera. Where he says to the person who said the poem to ke root ke jana tera, that jaan le jata hai meri root ke jana tera, that if you get upset with me and leave, that's it takes my life, that aise aane se to behtar tha na aana tera. That if that's what you were gonna do, it's better off that you didn't even turn up. So what else is going on, people? What else is news? What's going on? What's preoccupying the minds of the amazing people? Yep, that's it, folks. Vah. That's what else is I will take a look at a little later on. I will discuss Tawatur, the concept of Tawatur. And I will also discuss, I've been asked to look at the verse of the Quran that deals with the women, a verse that's telling the Prophet about who he can marry and so on, and somebody's asked that, what does that actually mean? So I will look at that as well. When he wore Aisha's garment, some Christians say Muhammad revealed revelation when he wore Aisha's garment. I honestly do not even know what that means. Locked in from New Zealand, ahlan wa sahlan. Ashfaq Ali, ahlan wa sahlan. Yoshi says, brother. It's okay, na'am, brother. What is going on, brother? So what are some questions? Shall I take some that have already been submitted? Shall we see what's preoccupying the minds of the amazing people out there? I've been, by the way, I was, because I'm really fascinated by languages as it is, and I was going over some, Farsi, Persian poetry of Rumi and of Amir Khusrow. Now, Amir Khusrow, Khusrow was one of the ancient classic Indian poets and one arguably scholar. He was from the time of, I don't know if you guys have heard of a famous saint from India called Nizamuddin Awliya. So this is his student, and Khusrow, or known as, famous as Amir Khusrow, he is the father of Qawwali. You have the Qawwali, he's the father of that. He allegedly kind of set that into motion, the whole Qawwali thing. But I was reading some of his poetry and I was surprised that I could actually understand most of it. Even though I've not really been studying, I only years back did a few sessions of Farsi. I was actually meant to be working and I was just bored, and I was just online, and I was just like, oh, so I just spent that whole afternoon. I must have gone through about 16 lessons or something. It was on the when you're meant to be, when you're working. Oh, it's been a difficult job today. That must have been about something like 7 years ago or something, or maybe more, maybe about 8-9 years ago. I don't know. But this one time I sat down and I went through Yeah, probably about 9 years ago actually. So I sat down and I was at work, and I ended up going through about over a dozen kind of lessons on Farsi just online. I was like, oh wow, oh that makes sense, that makes sense. So I have not really studied it since then or anything, and but I was reading his poetry in Farsi, and I could just understand almost most of everything I was just reading in those several couplets. And then that took me on to this Kashmiri. So I was really intrigued by, wow, the sound of Kashmiri, Koshur, the Kashmiri they speak in the Valley of Kashmir, Indian occupied Kashmir. And it sounds so much like Persian, but it's not Persian. And I started checking it out, and I thought, whoa, when I went online and I heard some songs, and I was really, I thought, wow, that's like really, it's like touches your soul. I thought, wow, I want to, you know what, I want to learn Kashmiri. So I made a post, and subhanAllah, several people have reached out to me. But there's so little resources that are out there to learn Kashmiri. I've been checking online. One person has been quite helpful. He's been sending me a few kind of resources. I've been going through them. But there were some songs on YouTube that I saw. There was an artist by the name of Alif. Very intense. Wow, it's like you can feel the intensity on the other side, the emotions, and obviously the tragedy that the people in Kashmir are kind of the suffering so long. And there's another artist by the name of, I think, Yawar Abdul. Abdul. So I think he has one track which I really loved called Tamanna, and he's got the poetry of Ghalib in there, and that's the Urdu. He's got his Kashmiri poetry of an old, I think it's an ancient poet, female poet called Habba Khatun, and who's like hundreds of years old from the time of Emperor Akbar. And then in the end, he's got Amir Khusrow's kind of Persian. So he's got Kashmiri, Urdu, and Persian. And this is how I kind of made that link into, I saw his track. But he sings it so well. Wow. But yeah, so that's, let's see what else is going on, people. Right. So yeah, before we, I would always, and I feel that the people of Kashmir, especially occupied Kashmir, Indian Kashmir, that they're going through so much, and the strength that they have to just carry on with everyday life, you know, the strength that they have to channel that energy into maybe music or art or words, poetry. I absolutely salute that, and you know, may Allah really create ease for these people, grant them the liberation and the freedom they need. And I advise everybody to support their cause, inshallah. You know, because it's just amazing that they can even, you know, express themselves in all these ways and do all this despite what's going on. But they are, it's a beautiful place, a beautiful people, and beautiful kind of heritage. There's, in the words of Amir Khusrow, who I was speaking of, the poet, the ancient Farsi Indian subcontinental kind of legend, he writes that agar jannat beru or agar firdaus beru zaminast aminast. That he said, if paradise, firdaus, is ever to be on earth, it is here, it is here, it is here. And those are allegedly his famous words. So what's going on? What's going on? Do you have similarities with Al-Azhar scholars than other types of scholars? As in similarities, as in goatee beards and watches, bracelets? Do I have similarities to them? Well, it depends what they're involved in. If it's a criminal case, then I hope not. Right, so could you explain the Islamic theological stance on child sexual abuse? Astaghfirullah, what a sick question. Why would you think that the Islamic stance would be any different than anybody else with regards to why Allah allows this? Astaghfirullah. Inna lillahi wa inna. Why does God allow what might? The child had done no evil, and the effects are almost everlasting. Any advice on how to tackle? Muhsin, I'm not sure I'm not sure what you mean. Like, if you clarify, what are we talking about? You said something, the sex abuse. I don't understand. Like, what's God got to do with the sex abuse? Help me understand what you're asking, because obviously I would imagine any sane human being would utterly condemn sexual abuse, let alone towards children. Children or non-children, it's utterly non-acceptable. Especially, it's even more so horrific with children involved. So I don't understand that question. Ya Sheikh, is Dawra Hadith necessary to become a scholar? Waqas Mahmoud is asking, is Dawra Hadith? Alright. You see, what does it mean to be a scholar? This is an arbitrary term. Now, some people have a system, they have a mechanism, a syllabus. Part of the syllabus is the kind of crowning. Okay? The crowning, not the crowning when childbirth, although this could be, as a metaphor, the crowning. the Maulana is the Maulana sticking his head out of the course, and he's got an imama on, and you're like, what the hell? And he's got this really scruffy beard. You're like, what have we given birth to? This birth process has to stop. So, so not crowning in that sense, the crowning as in when a baby is born, but the crowning of the course. So this is, as the person emerges, the kind of icing is Dawra Hadith, where they study the major books of Hadith from cover to cover. And they usually study them with different perspectives, so usually fiqh and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if it's necessary, but from the social perspective, once you've done that, people will then acknowledge you to be a scholar. Arguably, you could still be a scholar without doing that if you are qualitatively there, but people won't socially accept you. It's a bit like, I don't know, once you've undergone a certain training, everybody says, yeah, this person. You know, once you've taken a driving test, people say, oh, yes, this person is a driver. But technically, I mean, you could be a driver before, but legally, you can't. But this is, in a similar way, this is a social acceptance. It's not a legal acceptance, but it's a social, that once you've done this training, everybody says, yep, you know. That said, most people who do these courses are not really... most of them are just, unfortunately, just fall by the wayside in terms of quality. But I would say if you can do Dawra, definitely do it. He's basically asking why some children get sexually abused and some not. Astaghfirullah. What a sicko. What kind of a sick question is that? As in, that's makes no... Because that's being framed as though he's asking why some do and some don't, as in, like, shouldn't they all? Is that astaghfirullah? Toba, toba, toba. People, you've had too much to drink tonight. Right. How does the average person... Right, there was a question. Oh, guys, before I forget, Mufti Maravia. Alright, so this... he's in the house, people. I believe he's still online, unless he's gone offline now. But I've been in touch with Mufti Maravia, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. He's from Preston, I believe. He's on Facebook. Except I don't think he has the title Mufti on Facebook, but he is a Mufti. He just has his name, Uthman. Now, he's invoked Kashif, Ustad Kashif. People, Sheikh Kashif is in the house. Ahlan wa sahlan, Sheikh. Tasharrafna. Right, so I was speaking to Mufti Uthman Maravia, and he's very involved in the whole organ donation, to donate organs. Okay, this is not a euphemism, people. Okay, you need to be thinking straight, guys. Think straight, okay. This is not your This isn't for an excuse for you guys to be up to some naughty. This is organ donation, okay? Right, so the question is that how do organ donations work? And I'm actually so overwhelmed by having learned what the process was, as in an overview. I was so surprised and shocked at my own ignorance on this matter. So just as a summary, to tell you guys that I was totally unaware. This is me, right? I was totally unaware. This is what I thought, people. I thought that when, let's say you donate your organs. This is the Jahil me now. Mufti, this is organ donation, cuz. Right, so I thought once you donate your organ, let's say you've kidneys or whatever, they take them away, and let's say they can take them successfully. Like I thought, fine, once you're dead, they take your organs, so long as they're healthy. So with the condition they're healthy, so they take your, I don't know, lungs, or let's say kidneys, or whatever it is, liver, and what they will do is they will kind of put them, store them, chemically preserve them. All the freezing, and this is, in my mind, all this kind of like freezing, I don't know, they've got nitrogen over it, got in this expensive kind of this equipment, and they've preserved them. And along comes a person who has a need, and they say, well, yep, in the organ resources, we've got a liver or a kidney that matches that, and it gets arranged. But then I realized I'm an utter jahil. I've got no idea that that's totally how it does not work. Okay, so people, that's how not to organ donate. Okay, so the actual method is you see, and it's so shocking to learn that first of all, the organs that they take from you, yes, they have to be sound, but first of all, it depends on your death. Your death must take place whilst they've got you, hopefully either within the hospital or hooked up to things that can actually preserve. Because if your heart stops beating and stops sending blood to the organs, within, I've heard, like just 5 minutes or so, the organs become useless. This is most of the organs. So this is the first part that I was quite shocked to learn about. Secondly, I was shocked to learn that once they do remove the organ, they must transplant it within 6 hours, generally speaking. Otherwise, the organ becomes useless. So you just have a very short window, small window, to kind of do the, have you watched that Bollywood clip with the viral one where he's taking that heart to the hospital and the villains are shooting him and he's like dodging the bullets and he's beating up all these villains along the way, and then when he's totally stuck, he just throws the heart and it goes flying and it goes, smashes through the window and it lands inside and the heart starts beating. Allah, Allah. If anybody could do it, Bollywood could do it. So now, yep, so that thing, there's Uthman on this, but GM Uthman, that's called circulatory death. So you only have a very short window in which they can transplant the organ. So they have to take it out. Now, depending on where the person that needs it, let's say it's whatever it is, they're going to take out the heart or whatever it is, the other person, he could be on the other side of the country that needs it. And not all hospital, I think there's only a very few, I think there was less than, I think just a handful of hospitals in the entire country that specialize in organ transplants. So they have to get both the organ and the patient to the hospital in time within that window to make the transplant. In addition to other checks, like there has to be in certain things a genetic match, like let's say it's a kidney, it has to genetically match, or other things have to match the kind of recipient as well. considering all of that, you think, how on earth do they manage even a single organ transplant? Because you think, well, if a person, because most people, first of all, don't die, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that most deaths do not actually happen like just in the hospital with healthy functioning organs. I'm assuming most deaths are not like that. Once again, I could be wrong. But so I would assume people just die, like whether they're out or whatever's happened, or a heart attack or an accident, or, you know, or whatever it is. So I'm assuming most people are not on a hospital bed all chained up to, or, you know, all kind of tubed up and then die. I'm assuming, so that eliminates a huge portion. Then the death must be like brainstem death. And not like your heart can't just stop beating, because, or if it does, the machines must keep the organs healthy. So that is another wow. And then those that do die like that, they have to be organ donors. And then the recipient they have to do the transplant within 6 hours. You think, well, that narrows the whole scope down so much that it's a miracle that organ transplant can actually successfully takes place, organ donation. And then people, that which does happen is usually, like let's say in the UK, is the non-Muslim community. It's generally just non-Muslims that are doing the organ donation. So because most Muslims in this country are ethnically not English or not white, so we're either South Asian, or, you know, they might be Arab, Middle Eastern, or North African, or African. So most of these organs that are, let's say, that do successfully make it, they're not a good match, or they're not a match at all for most Muslims. So we need to kind of, so I think that things that Mufti Uthman is doing in creating an awareness on organ donation, and Muslims must, and they should really be donating their organs, okay? So you don't need to think that they just take your organs out if you've like just because you've said, yes, I will donate, and you die. They don't just take everything. They only take it out if there's a successful match and a recipient that they can get it to. So it's not like, all right, lads, quickly, pull everything out of his body. It's not quite like that. So I think this is something that must be taken seriously. I was glad to hear that, as Mufti Uthman was telling me, that from next year they're rolling out the law in England that everybody by default will be a donator. Like you would be on the register to donate your organs if applicable. And you have the option to opt out if you want, because right now it's the other way around. Like nobody's on the register unless you opt in. But then from next year, I hear that 2020 they're rolling out the law that everybody's automatically opted in, but you have the right to opt out. I just hope the Mulvis don't just start misleading people and misfeeding them information that this is haram. It is not haram. The person is actually doing one of the greatest acts of humanity. They are actually potentially, because it's so difficult, like I said, to even find a recipient that could render a successful transplantation. But this person may potentially be saving a life. Okay. And as Allah says in the Quran, that وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا, who gives life is as though he has given life to the whole of humanity. And what could be a greater gift as you die to be able to give life to somebody else? I think that's an amazing kind of it's an amazing way to leave this dunya. You know, if you're gonna leave it anyway at some point, we're all gonna be like, the angel's here. It's like, yeah, you know, I was just on episode 11 and I just got one more box set. What do you say? Right, so I think you could save, as Mufti Uthman has just typed, you could save up to 9 lives. as you die potentially by the things that they could take out. So I think people definitely promote it, get involved, and if you hear anybody spewing hatred against these kind of things, please ignore them. It is not haram. That is a misunderstanding, that's all. There were many Muslim scholars that gave fatwas of the permissibility of this way back in the 60s. People like Mufti Muhammad al-Aziz Juayyid, who was the Shaykh al-Islam of his time and the Grand Mufti of Tunis, and obviously the Mufti of the Malikiyah. He has his whole article, which I've shared previously, it is on YouTube, saying why it was permissible back then. Now I believe it's a must. Cool, guys, so I hope that's awesome. I will touch up as well. I heard Mufti told me, Maravia, that the Shia have a campaign. I thought that's interesting to mention. That the Shia have a campaign called Imam Hussain Blood Campaign. So on the day of Ashura, obviously on the day of Ashura, but the 10th of Muharram, we're all aware of some Shia do kind of like beat themselves and do all of that. And although many Shia scholars do consider that haram, but some Shia still do it. But so some Shia scholars, they said, look, if what you want to do is kind of give blood, then why don't you on the 10th of Muharram, for the sake of Hussain radiallahu an, go and donate blood? And even though as almost as a bizarre link, if you like, to the topic, but it's still an amazingly effective one, that people have kind of taken up the cause and they've gone. And I hear that on the 10th of Muharram, many Shia people from the Shia community go and they donate blood. And I think that's an amazing way that some of the Shia scholars have kind of taken an incident that looks very horrific and it kind of shames, let's say, Islam and especially Shia Islam by the media, and they've given that a very a compassionate rendition in saying, look guys, don't do this, but instead of that, why don't you go donate blood? And I think the overall message, it doesn't have to be on the 10th of Muharram, but the overall message Sunni scholars should encourage also of doing things like that. Cool. That, yeah, exactly. I think that's a very creative, es genial in Espanol, people. It's awesome, the kind of solution they came up with. Right, so what are some other questions? Let's... You know, you open Facebook and it goes off on... The worst is, like, you know, when I fall asleep sometimes so often. Like, I'll be sitting on my chair and I'll just fall asleep. And sometimes I'll have my hand... Yeah, don't let your imaginations run. I'll have my phone in my hand. Control. So, and then I'll wake up and I'll think, oh my God, what did I go into? What did I like? It's got to explain, what have I subscribed to? People are like, Mufti Abu Layth just subscribed to? Huh? Okay. Es muy interesante. So Mufti's now... Mufti supports those celebrities as well. Well, what else? What else is new, people? I'm just going into the questions. Anything new going down? Let's see. What does the verse say? We've raised him onto ourselves. It depends. You're talking of Shiraz. I've given many explanations of that. It doesn't say, it depends which verse you're speaking about. One says we gave him death. That we, inni rafi'uka wa mutawaffika, I'm raising you and I'm giving you death. That's the verse to Jesus in the Quran. But anyway, I mean, and then some people want to interpret the word death as a non-literal death, but that's up to them. Can you initiate a dialogue with Ustad Abdul Rahman Hassan As-Salafi? A dialogue. What would we possibly have to discuss in common as a dialogue? Acha. Salam Mufti Sahib. We are going for Umrah soon, and I wanted to know if the contraception pill can be used. Huh? How do you Umrah ke liye ja rahe hain ya honeymoon pe ja rahe hain? They're going on a oh sorry, there's more to the question. I thought that's a rather interesting question. We're just Sheikh, we're going on Umrah, so we're just wondering if so if it can be used to delay the menses. Oh sorry. My bad. That answer come too quick. Right, I had to open up the question, right? So if it could delay the menses, acha. Yes, of course you can delay the menses, no problem, no hay problemas. Delay the menses. Okay, so, and you know something? I'll tell you something interesting, people. That Mufti too quick. Don't worry. Huh? Is there medication for things like that? What did Daagh say? ऐसे आने से तो बेहतर था ना आना तेरा. If that's the kind of coming, then it was better that you didn't come. That's poetry, yeah. It's innocent. It's your minds that are filthy, people. You need your mind. You need to control your mind, right? So, I was getting distracted. It's interesting that even in the time of the companions, they used to use certain herbs, certain plants that would delay the menses. So this thinking was back then, because I've read that some of the companions used to advise that why don't you make up, they used to use a particular leaf from, I don't know whether it was the arak branch or something, some tree and herbs, and they would kind of make some kind of potion out of that, and that would delay the menses. But it's interesting to see that people back then were using these kind of methods as well. So what else is, people? What is going on? What is going on, people? Masala. Yeah, there'll be time for masala. Mufti Ibrahim Amir is in the house, people. Our young Maliki to be Mufti, inshallah, is in the house. LGBT Parkfield Equality Act. Come on, Mufti. You wanna. I wanna what? Sidi Yusuf is saying that, come on, the LGBT Parkfield Equality Act. Come on, Mufti, you wanna. Don't fight the feeling. You you want to. I honestly don't want to. I have zero attraction this way. I'm sorry, my friend Sidi Yusuf. Brother, this one only brotherly love, I'm afraid. So I'm not sure what the question is there. Right, so in the Wakil of Amritsar newspaper, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad wrote an obituary heaping praise onto Ghulam Qadiani when Ghulam Qadiani died. What are your thoughts? Well, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad is an amazing scholar of the past. He's also associated with the Deobandi scholars, but he was a very kind of open-minded scholar. I believe he was half of Arab descent and half Indian descent. I think I could be mixing things up, and he was very critical about certain issues, and he wasn't like a blind follower in things. And amongst one of those things was this topic of the second coming of Jesus. He was also one of those scholars that said that was just a myth and wasn't actually authentic. But it's so allegedly the Hez is asking that he wrote an obituary praising Ghulam Qadiani upon his death. What are my thoughts? Look, I would say, if he did, fine. I mean, Ghulam Ahmad Mirza Qadiani, I know, in the past I've cracked a few jokes a few at him, you know, what was it? Hariram serial kisser. You know, there was a character that I was showing. But look, we don't actually know, you know, we've never met Ghulam Ahmad Mirza Qadiani. I do feel that he was suffering from some kind of mental health issues. And maybe other than those issues aside, he may have been generally a great human being. He may have been. Obviously, people who knew him, his contemporaries, would know that better. They, you know, may have met him, sat down with him. He may have been, I don't know, like somebody who did other things. So besides his wacko idea of him being the saved Messiah, the Messiah sent to save the world, beside that, he may have actually been a very decent person to people in their interaction. He may have been. I'm not saying he was. I'm not saying he wasn't. I don't know about him like that. I never met him, and I've never met anybody that met him. But so if Abul Kalam Azad, who most likely would have actually met him, most likely, he may, you know, say some good words about him after he passed away. Why not? I don't think there's anything wrong with praising other human beings. Especially if you know them. You see, I was being asked about him from a theological perspective, not as a human being. I was being asked about him, what do you think about him claiming that he came to save the world? And I thought, well, that's not only a joke, but it's not a funny one. And then, obviously, because some of the Qadianis were trolling me, and I told them stop trolling me, and they didn't. And then obviously, you know how this one works, you know. If you troll, I troll back. So I was obviously trolling him. So I was showing and saying that, look at, you know, just look at his turban and look at this and that. But I was really primarily trying to speak from a theological perspective, that look, I don't believe Mirza Qadiani came to save the world, and if he did an awful job of it, because he didn't save jack all, like nothing's saved. So that was my perspective. But as a human being, he might have been a great human being. He might have been somebody that, you know, visited the sick and gave in charity and smiled at people. He might have been, obviously these things I wasn't being asked, like, what do you think of him as a human being? Because I would just say, I honestly don't know. He may have been the fact that he has followers shows that he must have been a good human being to at least so many people. He must have been. So that's what I would say. Like, so there's no harm in people speaking nice about him. Melissa how do you pronounce Epsilon or Salam Mufti, I need to repeat my question and ask you to answer tonight. You must answer. This is one of those, this is basically, you ignored my question. Right, so dear Mufti, this is like one of those, you know, what is it? Dear Deirdre, what was the problem aunt questions that you know, the one where, there's that famous one with where she writes in and says, what was it? The problem where you have dear something, and she writes into this guy and she says, well, dear whatever, I've got a problem that I set off. I went, so I live, me, my sister, whatever, and my husband was there, and I was going off to work, and I got in the car and I drove up, and about so many meters down, the car kind of broke down, it stalled. So I thought, okay, look, I'll just go back in and quickly. So she says, I went in and I found my husband having an affair with my own sister. So, you know, can you help? So he responds by saying, oh, I think if you switched off the car, gave it a while and started it again, it should hopefully get... It's like a cold engine can stall at times. It's okay, you know, if you let it rev it for a little while, and then just get it warmed up, and then take. That's the kind of, you know, where you completely miss the question. Anyway, folks, what's going on? Let's get this question before I miss it. Could you please explain why Allah sent down Christian narratives Holy Spirit, Jesus as the Word of God. I know, and you made it clear in past sessions, that it was about building bridges and highlighting connections between Christians and Muslims, Muslim communities. But, right there, where are we? Muslim. But I can't understand why then we don't follow these particular ayat in our living tradition. I would even say most of the ummah deny them. Wow. Question by Melissa, people. Sorry, there was just some chat. I was trying to see if I could make sense of some of the comments. I couldn't. Right, so Melissa, I have answered before that these verses that were used in the Quran, like the Word of God or the Holy Spirit, were there to build bridges between Muslims and the Christian communities, because Islam, in its formative years, it was a make or break deal. That said, I don't think Muslims deny those verses today. I don't think that but I think they just never, they always just understood it as in a kind of metaphorical sense, like God, Jesus being the Word of God, that that wa kalimatuhu, that his word which alqaha ila Maryam, that God had sent on to Maryam. So most Muslims, it depends, some Muslims understood that to mean, oh, Jesus was born without a father and therefore that word was the command to be. So many Muslims translate it as that. Some Muslims translate it as, no, he was just the word, as in he was there to spread the good word, as in this is what he was, like the gospel, the good news, the good word, like that kind of. So it's more a metaphor that his message was one of hope, like he came to remove the Jews from a kind of a very rigid scripturalism to this, this open, liberated, spiritual sense of religion. So I think most Muslims, they don't really, and hence they associate a lot of, in Islam, there's a culture of associating a lot of spirituality with Jesus. And these words, Ruh al-Qudus, the Holy Spirit and the Word of God, and the people call him Ruhullah, the Spirit of Allah. And so I think there's a lot of spirituality associated with Jesus. But I don't think Muslims definitely don't deny in that sense any verses or any message to do with Jesus like that. But they don't take those things literally, that's all. Maybe I haven't understood your question properly, but I don't really see that being a problem in that sense. Somebody said that Malm is saying it's okay to praise him even now as a person after he knows his beliefs and false claims. Right, okay, so can you praise, like I said, it's okay to praise somebody as a person. Not endorsing you don't need to endorse their message. Like you can always use certain, like some people could have some very good positive, let's say, attributes about them. But maybe they've got a lot of problematic ones as well. So it doesn't mean, so we spoke earlier on about this terrorist in New Zealand. Now somebody could say, oh, he took care of pets and things like this. He could have had a positive attribute to him. But it's all eclipsed and shadowed by this evil act that he's carried. So in light of that, it would be wrong to start praising him there and then, because he's just done a horrendous act. And this is why some of the media are horribly responsible for, especially the Daily Mail, for saying things like, oh, the poor little blonde boy who, how did he get misled? And you think, I'm going to swear now, that you think, well, what do you mean the poor little blonde boy? This is, are you trying to just evoke sympathy for this butcherer, this person who's just butchered, 50 people, if not more? Now, so there's a time and place, but my point is, Ghulam Mirza Qadiani has been long dead, long dead. So if somebody asked him, can anybody praise him as a human being, like he did some, let's say, some human good acts, of course you can. There's nothing, but generally, we as Muslims don't accept his message. Okay. Hope that makes sense. People, Imam Mark Manley is in the house. Ahlan wa sahlan, Sheikh. Ahlan wa sahlan, tasharrafna. People, those of you that haven't already connected with Imam Mark, you must. Amazing Imam, stateside in America, has some awesome podcasts, which usually I see on Instagram, and also some kind of pictures and photography that he shares and his insights. So do definitely, if you know, reach out to the Sheikh and benefit from him. Right, what does Allah... Whoa. These are moving so fast. Was it the same kid? He became uglier, to be honest. Yeah, that's talking about that. What does Allah breathe... When Allah breathes his ruh into Adam mean, and who is the ruh? You see, I think somebody's asking about when Allah says وَنَفَخْنَا فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِنَا, we breathed into Adam our ruh. What does that mean? I think that this ruh was kind of... This is my take. You do not have to accept these people. My take was I mean, it wasn't a physical breathing. Most people don't accept that to be a physical... It wasn't like God breathed into him, but this was the I mean, whether you want to say it was a metaphor or it was literary usage of language, like we breathed into him. Most Muslims accept that to be literary usage. But I would say what was breathed into this ruh was consciousness. That's my personal take, that I understand ruh and consciousness to be synonymous, but many people disagree with me on that, and I accept that. Chaudhry Usman is saying, Salam wa alaikum assalam, Chaudhry Saab. Right. Yep, so consciousness is my understanding. So what are some other... Damn, there were some questions I was about to answer, and I've forgotten now what they are. Gender dysphoria. Any mirchi masala? Yeah, we'll do some masala, of course. What does Islam say about gender dysphoria? If diagnosed, can one undergo a gender transformation? You see, I want to speak about this. Let me... People... Alright. Let me loosen up. Right, gender dysphoria. Right, so look. Gender dysphoria is when a person is confused about their gender, or they feel they are the other gender. Nowadays we get confused, how many genders are there? I'm like, are there still two? Are we still running on two? Or is there like what's going on? What do we... You see, so people like, as a man, you say, oh, I'm actually a woman trapped inside a man's body. Or as a woman, you go one day, oi, I'm actually a man. Oh, Sultan Rai, oi, trapped inside a woman's body. And I think, you see, there are multiple issues to be tackled here. One issue is that, like, first of all, where these cases are legitimate biological concerns, I believe that there is permissibility where there are legitimate biological concerns, and the medical experts can have their input and say what those issues are, and the person can have their own introspective analysis. And I feel Islam has a catering element for that. I do believe that. But I want to come to some other very important points here. You see, I think part of this new age, people are creating unnecessary confusion. I understand, look, if somebody is gay, let them be. That's their life, it's their choice, and nobody has the right to persecute them. I support that, I believe that, okay? Now, but on the back of all of this, there's this push to kind of enable confusion. That, oh, are you really a boy? Are you really a girl? You can be a girl if you want. You can be a woman. You can be. Just putting unnecessary doubt into people. Children, they want to put doubt into children. I think that is bang out of order. I am honestly, firmly against creating doubt for children. I think that is a form of abuse. I think it's good to, at this level, what you should say to children is, look, when you're discussing things like, let's say, gender roles, or relationships, you could say, look, husband, wife, like they teach children. Like my young daughter is 4 years old, and she knows the concept husband, wife. She knows these things. She's seen it on TV. She's seen it, let's say, in real life. She's seen it she's been told about it at school. Now, to say, look, this is how it happens. By the way, some people might get married if they want to. And they haven't done this at her school. But if they wanted to say, look, some people get married, even men, some men get married and some women get married to themselves. I think that's fine. I've got personally no problem if they want to say that. You can say that, look, if they do that, that's fine. Some men and men get married, some women and women get married. But generally you have this husband-wife scenario. Right, okay. Some Muslims are against that. I'm not. I think that's fine. Homosexual people do exist in societies, and there's no harm in creating an awareness about that. But what is wrong is to kind of say to these children that, oh, just because you look like a girl doesn't mean you're a girl. Do you want to be a boy? Do you feel you're a boy? You can be a boy if you want to be a boy. Or saying to a boy, oh, just because you look like a boy doesn't mean do you want to be a girl? Do you want a girl's name? I was seriously so shocked. If this be true, I heard there was a school that said as a mandatory task that you have to write on Valentine's Day a letter to a love letter to a friend of the same gender. If that be true, that is disgusting. That is abuse. You can't do these kind of things. You can't say you have to write a love letter. You can say, look, write a love letter, even if it's to the same gender. That's your choice. But you can't say, everybody, today's exercise, everybody's going to be gay and we're going to write a letter to that. You can't be forcing these kind of things on children and confusing them or telling them things like this, creating doubts. So that's something I think that needs to be tackled. So I agree with this. I'm against that kind of, that intensity of confusion. Another thing I want to pick up on here, okay, is, in this day and age, people, I don't know what it is. Look, I'm all up for women's rights. I always support women's rights as much as I can. I've always been about empowering women wherever they need to be empowered. I feel that Islam empowers them. I've always spoken out for equal rights Islamically, that whether it's going to be in the will, whether it's going to be in terms of inheritance. I've given the kind of diversity, the different opinions, whether it's on things like that abuse is unacceptable under all circumstances, that so on. So I've spoken out, and I continue to do that because I believe in that. Okay. That said, I seriously do not understand the problem of this age against masculinity. There seems to be this hatred against men being men. And I don't know what that is about. Like, why do people hate on men? Like, they call it toxic masculinity. Why is it toxic? Like, if you asked me, what is one of the most attractive features of women, obviously, apart from, I could obviously list out I could say, wait, here's images. Obviously, apart from like all men, you could list all the physical attributes, I'm sure. But one of the most major attractive features for me as a person in a woman is femininity. I'm assuming most men, if not all men, are so overwhelmingly attracted to femininity. Like, they just are like without, they're just programmed. We're just obviously programmed to the physical features as well, but we're programmed to be attracted to. And I'm assuming it must be vice versa. I'm assuming. And some reports show that even these very, man-hating, feminist kind of women are still attracted to men like that are very kind of masculine. But I don't... Look, whether you like it or don't like it, that's up to you. I'm not saying everybody has to be very kind of macho or they have to be like that. Everybody can just be their natural selves. But why hate on masculinity? Like, why hate on it? What's wrong with a man being... A man should be a man, for God's sake. Not a half an excuse for one. Like, what? I don't get that. Like, and people are like, oh, but men should be all kind of soft and should be kind of like effeminate. And look, if you're naturally like that, fine. I've got no problem with if you're naturally all kind of soft and very kind of effeminate. Just don't hang around. Don't hang around the gym changing rooms. Don't end up in prison. And whatever you do, don't go to madrasa. Just beware of that trinity. But I'm saying, look, if a person is naturally like that, that's fine. But what is this push on hating on men who are masculine? Like, oh, this is, like men, okay, they say, but why do men have to like they say men like this kind of persona of being tough or being kind of like strong or they have that kind of macho, they look up to that macho thing. Oh, that's wrong, that's evil. Why is it evil? Why? But that's men that say, oh, but men should cry more. They should be more in touch with. Look, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be in touch with yourself. And true, many men find it difficult to express their emotions sometimes. And I'm all for encouraging people to do that. Trying to be... But you don't need to say like, oh, everybody should just be like all kind of, But honestly, every time I read this, it's like, I see online so much, and I see American kind of like movements very strong in this. I see a lot of American social media that is pushing all this toxic masculinity. And I feel like we're like a dying breed. A lot of the men are not men anymore. They're just like, just half an excuse for one. And so I don't know, man. Like, yeah, like very camp. You gotta be camp to be like a man now. There should be gender fluidity. It doesn't really make a difference. And it's like, get out of here, man. I'm sure that women must find real men attractive. Not like they must do, because if men find that femininity attractive, then it must be by the laws of nature, vice versa. I don't buy that they find this campness all very attractive. I mean, maybe they do, but I find it very difficult to believe. But I just think, look, if you're naturally like that, fine, but stop hating on men. But yes, condemn abuse wherever it happens. Condemn the deprivation of rights and things like this. I'm all with you, and I support you wholeheartedly. But yeah, that's my somebody said, what is a real man? Oh, Chaudhry Saab, don't worry, don't worry, Ibrahim. You'll find out. Just go to madrasa. They'll introduce you to a few real. I'm joking. I said joking. I'm the joking. Right. So somebody said, my friend, I need. Very funny. The moment you step in paradise. Somebody said, what will you do the moment you step in paradise? I will smoke some heavenly weed. What is the Akhirah like? We have no true understanding, but it's good to entertain the mind, I suppose. Let's take some questions. Right, okay, let's deal with this Tawatur thing. Or shall we... somebody said like Mike Tyson. I think people know what it means to be kind of masculine, and I don't think it needs to be defined. But there's many examples, you'll find them. But I just feel sometimes today, and you know, the reason I was saying this, I didn't mean to just have a rant, but the reason I was saying this is, you know, this hatred against men, or this masculinity, the problem with it is then empowering the far right. Because the right then are people who are fed up with these kind of impositions. Because they're saying that this is the left. And I finally understood what they meant by the left. Because I used to think, what does the left mean? So it's the impositionists. It's those who want to equally impose, you see. Otherwise, I think being for the left is absolutely fine if that's politically, as in less authoritarian control, more freedoms, things like that are all good. But we shouldn't be imposing on other people. And they want to impose this, and then that makes a lot of people angry. And they don't have a voice. And then they end up putting people like Trump in power because they're just fed up. You know, they feel that men have been kind of castrated. So this, I know I'm joking about it and I'm kind of having a rant, but this is a serious problem as well. Okay, so I think those of you still confused, you can watch some of those movies from the 80s. Watch some Stallone. Right, so right, Daniel Haqiqat. Right, okay. But I was, you know, with Daniel Haqiqat Jew, I did mention, look, I was very upset and disappointed with his, I seen that article where he's supporting the far, he's kind of being very sympathetic to the far right. And I'm just very disappointed with that. Right, so guys, let's discuss, okay, a verse in the Quran. Right, I'm going to take a look at, somebody's asked for Mutawatir, but let's briefly just look at this verse in the Quran. It's from Surah Ahzab, verse 50. A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim. Let's see, people. Right, okay, so verse 50, and it's to do with who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have as a wife. Now, people are raising some objections to this verse, and they've asked me, you know, can I kind of shed some light or explanation on what this verse means? So the verse is, يا أيها النبي إنا أحللنا لك أزواجك اللاتي آتيت أجورهن وما ملكت يمينك مما أفاء الله عليك. So, O Nabi, we have made permissible for you, halal for you, your wives, who you have married and you have given the mahar to, and who has come to you into your possession through fate. Mimma afa Allah, fate. Now, وَبَنَاتُ عَمِّكَ وَبَنَاتُ عَمَّاتِكَ, and the daughters through your uncles and the daughters through your wives. وَبَنَاتِ خَالِكَ وَبَنَاتِ خَالَاتِكَ, and the daughters through your maternal uncles and maternal aunts. اللَّاتِي هَاجَرْنَ مَعَكَ, those women who migrated with you, right? So they did the hijrah with you. وَامْرَأَةً مُؤْمِنَةً إِنْ وَهَبَتْ نَفْسَهَا لِلنَّبِيِّ, and a believing woman if she was to give herself to the Prophet. إِنْ أَرَادَ النَّبِيُّ أَنْ يَسْتَنْكِحَهَا, if the Prophet wanted her in marriage. خَالِصَةً لَكَ مِنْ دُونِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, exclusively for you as opposed to the Muslims generally. Now, قَدْ عَلِمْنَا مَا فَرَضْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ فِي أَزْوَاجِهِمْ, and we are aware of what we have mandated for them when it comes to their wives and that which comes to them. Here it says, and that which their right hand possesses, لِكَيْ لَا يَكُونَ عَلَيْكَ حَرَجٍ, so that you don't have any inconvenience. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا, and Allah is indeed most merciful, most forgiving. And then this goes on, there's another important verse, just two verses after, so verse 52, that لَا يَحِلُّ لَكَ النِّسَاءُ مِن بَعْدٍ, that women are no longer halal for you. وَلَا أَن تَتَبَدَّلَ بِهِنَّ مِنْ أَزْوَاجٍ, and you cannot swap, you cannot like exchange, as in leave wives and take new wives. This is to the Prophet. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ حُسْنُهُنَّ, even if you were attracted to them, إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ يَمِينُكَ, unless it was what your right hand possesses, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ رَقِيبًا. Now the reason I want to explain this verse is because people have asked me that some people are saying, well, look, the right hand possesses, that with the Prophet, you know, oh, what the right hand possesses, and God is saying he can have this, and if a woman gives herself to the Prophet, then the Prophet can have her. What does that mean? And how come the Prophet doesn't have to pay her, but normal people, like a mahar, and normal people pay a mahar? And so what is all of this going on? And, you know, is the Prophet being given certain exclusivities? And so some people were using this as a kind of attack against the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I tried to translate, first of all, as closely as I could, so you can see where they're taking the understanding from. Then I will give you the explanation. Okay. Now, yes, this verse is something that, first of all, is to the Prophet. By extension, it is to other Muslims as well, but it's directed at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, there is a difference of opinion. I will give you the diverse kind of opinions as well, but I will tell you what this first of all meant. Okay, so let me tell you what it actually meant, and then I'll tell you those who... somebody has shared the... I think somebody has shared the actual verse here, I'm not sure. Right, so this verse is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Allah has addressed him that the wives that you have taken, they are halal to start off with. Okay, this is the first and foremost important thing. Why? Because you have to remember, this came at the time when some people were trying to spread rumors about the Prophet that, oh, he's married here, his marriage is illegitimate, or he's taken so-and-so as a wife and it's not legitimate, that this isn't. And people had said, oh, hasn't he married Zainab, and Zainab used to be married to Zayd, and this was an adopted son of the Prophet, and that marriage is illegitimate, hasn't happened. And some people, some people believe that Maymuna, for example, was one of the wives and al-Masakin was one of the wives that gave herself to the Prophet, and the Prophet accepted her. So some people said, oh, that's not a legitimate marriage, these are not. So there was an air of kind of like a propaganda and people trying to cast suspicion on the character of the Prophet. So that's the backdrop. So that's what's going on. And there's nothing new about that. I mean, it was very well known that in Medina, people like Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul and other people who were known hypocrites, that the Prophet spared. He did not harm him, even though it was well known his kind of many attempts to even assassinate the Prophet, or to at least always conspire against the Prophet and Muslims. Yet the Prophet even prayed his janazah. So there wasn't this, but these people were known that they did exist in the very midst of the Muslim community in Medina. So these rumors were there, and people were spreading this, and these verses are revealed. So Allah is telling the Prophet that these wives that you have taken are halal for you. So that's the first and foremost important point. Inna ahlalna laka azwaj allati ataytahunna ujurahunna. That we have made this halal. These wives that you married and you gave dowry and you did this to, we have made them halal for you. That this is halal. That do not listen to the kind of confusion or the kind of background noise of these people who are hating on you. Now, the next thing, some people were objecting about Maria Qibtiyya. Now, Maria, she was a Copt, and she'd come from Egypt. She was sent via Muqawqis. So Muqawqis was the ruler at the time in Egypt, and he'd sent her and gave her to the Prophet. Said that, look, I'm sending this. Now, she was sent as a servant. The Prophet married her. Now, some Muslims have naively not acknowledge that she was married to the Prophet. However, the student of Imam Malik, Ibn Zubaylah, writes in his book, one of the most earliest historians who writes, he writes a book on the Akhbar of Medina, and he writes a book on the wives of the Prophet, Zawjatun Nabi. In there he includes Maria al-Qibtiyya. He was the direct student of Imam Malik. Now, yes, she lived on the outskirts of Medina. She lived in the Awali. She was not an Arab, and most likely probably couldn't speak Arabic. Maybe she learnt it along the way. But you can imagine the kind of outcast scenarios that would have created. So some people disliked her. One, this was a very high, Arabs were quite hierarchical with the tribal structures. Two, she wasn't even an Arab. And the Prophet and her had a very good relationship. So you can imagine why some people wouldn't like her. And her communication barriers, and hence the Prophet, so she doesn't have any harm, housed her in the Awali, which is outside of Medina. It was a residence outside of Medina. Now, she is the only person who the Prophet ever came to the Prophet like that. Like she was given to the Prophet. The Prophet didn't just take her like that, he married her. And this is the proof, because in this some people have tried to say, oh, here Malakat Yaminuk means what your right hand possesses, but this says Mimma afa Allahu alayk. And what is fate? Fate is those, if in its strict sense, fate is used in the Quran. If the Muslims went, let's say there was a battle, but there was no battle, like the Muslim army went somewhere and there was no battle, but the people had abandoned property and they had abandoned wealth and they had abandoned women and children. That everything you round up was called fate. But that which was obtained through non-warfare, that which was obtained through warfare is called ghanima. Okay, so the maghanim are not fate. You can check the books of Sharia, they have a totally separate bab for them and they have separate conditions. So there was never anything, there was never a woman that was ever presented to the Prophet as fate, ever. So the only incident that is used here is Maria al-Qibtiyya, and this is what Ibn Ashur writes in his tafsir. This is what Maulana Abul Kalam Azad writes in his tafsir. That the only woman that the Prophet ever had given to him was Maria Qibtiyya. And they say, and Ibn Ashur says, some people try to say that there was another one called Rayhana or something in an actual battle. And he said it was never thabit by any authentic hadith that the Prophet actually took her like that. So there isn't a single hadith that proves that is sahih, unquestionably. Now, so Maria Qibtiyya, right, so she was given to the Prophet, but the Prophet married her. Once again, there were objections to her. The other thing, that your relatives, why does Allah say that وَبَنَاتُ عَمِّكَ وَعَمَّاتِكَ وَخَالِكَ وَخَالَاتِكَ, these women are halal. And the Prophet did marry from some women related through relatives of his, but he didn't marry all of these. This was just Allah saying this is permissible. Not everything that he was saying is permissible, the Prophet did. So when it says you can marry the daughters of your uncle and the daughters of your aunt and the daughters of your maternal uncle and your maternal, it didn't mean he married all of these. Allah was making it clear because some people were presenting an objection that we don't believe that's permissible. So Allah was stating the permissibility. Inna ahlalna. It begins, we have made these things permissible. Not mandatory that you have to do it. So just to be clear on that. Now this point, then Allah says, Allati hajarna ma'ak, those women who migrated with you. Right, because this was another question. Muslim women that migrated, some of them previously, and the men, they'd left their families because they didn't embrace Islam. So they came to a new life. Those that came to a new life, if they were married before, does that marriage carry on? So the question was, it didn't. So some people, and there were other people, and this was to Muslims as well, it wasn't exclusive to the Prophet, that part, that they could, other people married as well, they intermarried, they'd embraced a new faith, they'd come to a new residence, hundreds of miles away. Now, some people said, but is that even halal? Allah is saying, Inna ahlalna, we have made that halal. Okay, because they've abandoned their ways of old and they've embraced this deen of Islam. Okay, now this one, some people have tried to object that وَإِن وَامْرَأَةً مُؤْمِنَةً إِن وَهَبَتْ نَفْسَهَا لِلنَّبِيِّ, and a woman, a believing woman who gives herself to the Prophet, right, gifts وَهَبَتْ نَفْسَهَا إِن أَرَادَ النَّبِيُّ أَن يَسْتَنكِحَهَا خَالِصَةً مِّن دُونِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. But this is just for the Prophet. Now some people have said, oh, so the Prophet can, if a woman gives herself to him, he can have her, but if another man wants her, then he has to pay, and what's this about, and how can the Prophet have any favors done to him? Look, that is so silly and absurd. So silly and absurd. Let me just clarify. Mahar in Islam is a mandatory gift, generally speaking. Okay, it's a mandatory gift. When a couple get married, the husband gives a gift to the wife. This is mahar. In the incident, in fact, it's related to this incident because one of the women, because there were four, allegedly the popular women who tried to gift themselves to the Prophet was Sharik ad-Dawsiyah, and there was Khawla bint Hakim. And then they say, some people said there were two others, Maymuna bint al-Harith and al-Masakin Zainab. Now these two, the latter two, are women that the Prophet married. Some people say they gifted themselves and then the Prophet married them. Some people say they aren't from the gifted ones. They're just regular women he just approached and proposed himself. But the first two, the Prophet didn't marry them. So the question here was, there were a number of things. One objection that people are, oh, well, why didn't the Prophet have to give mahar if he wanted? Why is he allowed to do this? Why does he even have this option? There's a debate whether the Prophet ever accepted a woman who said, look, I give myself to you, will you accept me as a wife? This meant, by the way, as a wife, but you don't need to give me any mahar. Did the Prophet ever accept any woman who said that? There's a debate. Many people say there's only two women who said that to the Prophet and he never accepted either of them. They're the popular ones. Sharik is one, ad-Dawsiyah, and Khawla bint Hakim. And she's the one when Aisha said, what's wrong with women? Don't they have any shame that they present themselves to men like that? The other two, Maymuna, who was married to the Prophet, and al-Masakin, who was Zainab, who was married to the Prophet, there's a debate whether they also came to the Prophet and said, or did the Prophet propose to them? But even if let's accept that they said, and the Prophet accepted them, right? This thing of gift, like, oh, I don't want a mahar from you. Look, most Muslims, many Muslim scholars accept that if a wife was to say, first of all, I don't want anything from you, that is enough in itself. In the hadith, when the one woman presents herself to the Prophet, says, look, marry me, I'll gift myself to you. And the Prophet doesn't want to marry her. And a person says, like, would she be prepared to marry me? And he asks the Prophet, and the Prophet asks her, and she obviously realizes the Prophet wasn't going to marry her, and she says, okay, I'll marry him. And the Prophet says to him, you must gift her something. And then he says, oh, but I haven't got anything. And the Prophet says, go find a ring. Iltamis walau khatiman min hadid. And he goes and he looks and he couldn't find something and he struggles. And the whole point is, it begins with this kind of and the Prophet says, okay, can you at least teach us something from the Quran as a gift? And he says, okay, I'll teach. And the Prophet says, okay, fine, use that as a gift then. Knowledge, let knowledge be the gift. You see, why wasn't this gift allowed to just be abandoned for all men? Because in the society where this came, you have to remember it was a very patriarchal society, and certain men may have manipulated that to their advantage, to exploit women, that in saying, look, well, look, you need to get married, but you're not allowed to ask me to give you a gift, or you're not. And this was obviously, it was an auspicious, it was obviously an occasion, a celebratory occasion, and a mandatory gift was necessary. That was the general custom, that was what they had to do. So this is why it's made mandatory for men in general. But where people are struggling, even for them, many scholars have said the gift could be the gift of knowledge. It doesn't, like if you don't have financial means, or if the woman says, I don't want something, that's fine. Many ulama have said that in the books. It's not. But why the Prophet was allowed to say, well, from the offset, if a woman was saying that, well, that's, you see, because from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's perspective, if a woman was to say to him, look, I don't want it, and she was to say in public, I don't want anything from you, I'm giving myself to you, will you accept me? If the Prophet accepted her, the chance of the Prophet exploiting her, from an Islamic perspective, we don't believe that the Prophet was going to exploit them. Now, somebody could argue that, well, oh, he's a human, he's this, he's that. They could argue that. The first point would be, which woman did he actually even accept? Because the two popular occasions are those women, Sharik, a Dawsiya, who he does not marry, and and you've got Khawla bint Hakim, who he does not marry. So which incidents are we even talking about? But yes, if the Prophet accepted her, fine. Allah says in the Quran that if a woman was to say this, if in aradan nabiyyan yastankiha, if he wanted to marry her, this is halal. For the Prophet being a prophet of God. But for people in general, let them give a gift. Now remember, this is if a woman herself is in imra'atun mu'mina wahabat nafsaha lin nabi. She is saying, I don't want something, I just want to marry you. So there's no exploitation here. You know, people say, oh my God, how come the Prophet gets away with... There was nothing. First of all, there wasn't even a single established incident that the Prophet... The two cases of Maymuna and Zainab al-Masakin, they were already women from an established background. They weren't kind of poor or anything like this. Now, some people have said, oh, they said this, and other people said, no, the Prophet proposed to them. So they're not even the famous incidents. The famous incidents are the first two, who the Prophet marries neither. And this verse was simply saying that if you do accept, it's permissible. It doesn't mean you had to have done it, just as it says you can marry from your paternal aunt, your paternal uncle, your maternal aunt, maternal... The Prophet didn't marry from all of these people. He didn't marry from all of them like that. So just because it was made halal, it didn't mean that the Prophet did it. Okay, this was just saying, Allah was saying that these things are not forbidden. In essence, any woman that agrees with a man, and even most, like I said, many scholars will say, if she said, I don't want something, and the guy was fine with that, I mean, the guy probably would be fine with that, but if she wanted that, then that's fine. Many scholars accept that anyway. But what they say is that, oh, but she has to let him at least offer. He must offer something. Now, that's in general to express that kind of that community spirit, I suppose. Right, so I hope that makes some sense. The thing I wanted to add here was, it goes on to say about the Prophet that you are not allowed after today to marry any other women beyond what you've already married. Unless they came through slavery. Now that's an interesting option, because it allowed that if you had an opportunity to free a woman through marriage, then that will always be permissible in that context. Obviously slavery, Islam had hinged it to become haram anyway with the day and age. That once it would reach, society would reach a certain status, it would become haram, and many of the great Maliki scholars have written about that as well, including Sheikh Ahmed Baba, I believe, Timbuktu from Timbuktu, who wrote on that a few hundred years ago as well. So, but this point, see, like now most Muslim men are always allowed to marry and remarry, and they're allowed to do that, but the Prophet wasn't. After that, that was it. He was told in that verse that this is it. It's a different story if your wives were to die and you could marry, but you can't generally divorce and marry afresh. That's the understanding of many scholars. And he was told that and some people say he was allowed to only marry those who had done hijrah if he was to marry. But the general understanding is that he wasn't allowed to marry anymore. That focus on the actual mission. So if people were to say that, let's say somebody was to say that the Quran was the Prophet saying this is revelation in his own favor, like he's trying to manipulate the laws to exploit people. If people are saying this, why on earth would the Prophet inhibit himself? Why would he say you're not allowed to marry after today? And why would he say this? That makes zero sense. He'd just be tying himself. Like, why not? Because if they're arguing, oh, he was after women, why not allow that option? Rather, it says, verse 52, لا يحل لك النساء من بعد. That you have married these women, we have made them halal. Don't listen to their objections. Don't listen to this propaganda. Ignore the noise and chaos. It is halal. But what you have married, and there will be no more new nikahs unless they had died or something, which they didn't in that sense, and the Prophet didn't marry after that. Why place such an imposition on himself if this was the Prophet pulling it out of thin air? It makes zero sense. So I think these verses, yes, when they are read in certain lights and in certain contexts, and people are presenting them and they're emphasizing certain words as opposed to the whole narrative. So they're emphasizing, oh, look, it says what came to you, what was given to you. And the right hand possesses, oh, slaves. But where did the Prophet show me when the Prophet had these female? Which female slaves did he have? Which are you talking about? This was talking about Maria al-Qibtiyya. And he married her. And just because, oh, if a woman was to give herself to the Prophet, yeah, but which woman did he marry like that? And just because it mentions it doesn't mean that he did it. Right? So it doesn't mean that he actually, and just as it mentions you can marry your paternal aunts, daughters of your paternal aunts, daughters of your paternal uncles, daughters of your maternal aunts, and daughters, as in these are halal, they're not haram. That's what it's saying. He didn't marry like each one of them. So just because it's showing parameters, it's not saying you must do this. I think that is very important to explain, and I wanted to explain that. So as people look, in all honesty, I want to. And some people argued that what was exclusive to the Prophet was the number. Many Muslims have argued that. My understanding is different on that, because I don't believe that the number of wives that a person is allowed to marry is restricted to 4. I actually believe, I go with what Imam Shawkani and those people have highlighted, that it's actually unrestricted, but it's just based on consent. Now, I'm not saying people need to be doing that. I'm not saying you go outside and collect yourself a harem. But I'm saying in Islam, it wasn't that wasn't haram. It wasn't restricted at 4. That's what I do see that argument as stronger. But because many people believe it was restricted at 4, so they say, oh, the other numbers were permissible for the Prophet. But I don't believe that. I believe that they were always open for everybody. There isn't a single Sahih hadith to show that only 4 was the number. That's a very weak hadith, as Ibn Abdul Bar has explained. Right, so, okay, I hope that, because the reason I want to explain this was, some people say, oh, look, the Prophet was after, was he after women? In all honesty, seriously, in a day and age like the Prophet's time, which was a patriarchal society, and sex was like a very natural thing. It wasn't like a taboo. Even in our day and age, it's a taboo. It wasn't a taboo in their society. It was very natural, right? The Prophet ﷺ, if he was after women, he had he had so much access to take that route. People were offering him money, women, sovereignty. Quraysh were offering him from the top, we will offer you everything. That, look, you just need to stop this da'wah. And I feel that that's a very unfair, prejudiced, a biased angle towards the Prophet, just to kind of hate on him or attack him, as people, but why did he marry these women? In most of the cases, when the Prophet ﷺ married, he married many people. He married women who were old. He himself was of age as well. He married old women. Sauda was very old, arguably older than the Prophet. Now, he married He married other women that were kind of destitute. He married, but it wasn't always, I'm not saying they were always sympathy marriages. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. The Prophet did like people and they liked him, and they were in a culture that accepted plural relationships. Now, I don't understand what the big deal is when we today are saying, look, oh, we should be accepting of LGBTQ, we should be accepting of this. You know, if a man and a man love each other, a woman and a woman love each other, what's wrong with that? You know, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with... And fine. But what's wrong with plural relationships? You know, why can you be... Why where societies accept them, wherever people accept them. Now, somebody may say, well, I don't accept that. Well, don't accept it. Now, nobody's telling you to be a part of it. It's like saying, oh, just because I'm not gay, well, I don't accept a homosexual relationship. Well, fine, don't be a part of one. You know, it's not a... So, just in these societies, the irony that where we move towards so much liberation and liberating people, we become so judgmental on societies that accepted certain relationships. It's up to them. You know, if they accept it, they accept it. You know, the Prophet gave his wives always a choice. In fact, it's a verse of the Quran that, you know, that you have, Ya Nisa an-Nabi, that if any of you wish to leave, just leave the Prophet. That you have there is no compulsion for them to stay. There was no, you know, it wasn't like, oh, they were being forced to stay and stuff like this. So just because our view of relationships today is very kind of usually, you know, one-on-one. That's our relationship understanding. Okay, fine. I'm not saying that's wrong. That's fine. That works. But what I'm trying to say is, why be so judgmental against other people where that works for them? People today live in open relationships. They're like, don't worry about it. You know, I'm with this person, but we're both in an open relationship. You know, we're chilling. You know, we're chilling in our free time. So the thing is that if that, you know, you can be very open to accepting even open relationships. So why hate on just something and say, oh, but the Prophet was a part of plural relationships and he must have been misogynistic? Why? So I wanted to say that, look, and by the way, people don't need to accept him. I understand the fact that non-Muslims obviously don't accept the Prophet. That's their choice, and they do not need to accept his ways. They do not need to accept his, but I just feel that they should be as objective as possible. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Okay, I hope that can, inshallah, shed some light. Right, so, right, that's enough of polygamy. Right, people have asked, can I discuss Tawatur before we run out of time today? Guys, so we've got this, look, whoa. Well, we've got this concept of Tawatur. We need to talk about this. What is Tawatur? Now, Tawatur is to do with hadith. Right, so, right, Claire Jones, Ibrahim, shukran for your kind and encouraging words. Right, so, oh, and a big shout out to the Egg Boy. I almost forgot, people. The Egg Boy. All right. Live on, man. Oh, much respect to him. I can't believe that politician, whatever, is allowed to be who he is in New Zealand. And he ought to be arrested, seriously, for hate crimes. And I think that young boy who egged him deserves an international award, honestly. Tribute coming out to you from Monday Nights with Mufti. If nobody else, at least we give him a tribute. Gio Merijan, Gio. Right, so, right, now coming to this Tawatur, we need to discuss Tawatur, people, because a lot of people use this. They say certain hadith are Mutawatir. Tawatur means something that has been transmitted en masse, that it's so transmitted that it's impossible. The definition they use is yastahil. It's impossible or inconceivable that everybody were co-conspirators in bringing about this lie. So, you know, it's like, duh. It's like one of those things like, duh. That's Tawatur, okay. So when a thing is of this value, it is mutawatir. So people give the example often like, how do you know a country exists? So you could say, well, I suppose more so today you could say, well, I've seen through social media, I've done this, and so many people, like they say, how do you know China exists? Say, well, obviously through all these things. Today, I suppose through technology we can actually zoom in. But in the past, how did people know China existed? Well, they just knew because everybody knew. It was common knowledge that it couldn't be a conspiracy just to delude you. So that is the definition of tawatur. And a thing that has that value is called mutawatir in Arabic. Now, these are just fanciful terms, but why was this debate important? Well, this was a theology debate, a debate to do with belief. It was nothing to do with hadith, it was to do with how you believe, how do we know what we know. So within belief, within theology, aqidah or kalam, ilmul kalam, you have a section which is to do with how do we have knowledge? Like, how do we know anything? Like if I asked you, how do you know something? So you will say, and this in modern terms, this is called epistemology. Okay, big word. Don't worry about it, people. Don't worry about it. Okay, so epistemology is dealing with the branch of knowledge, like how you know things, how you have the acquisition of knowledge. So, as an example, somebody, right? As an example, your senses. So somebody may say, "How do you know something?" You say, "Well, I saw it." Okay, fine. I heard it. You know, senses. I felt something. Or these. What about? How else can you know something? You can sometimes deduce things. Like I can put something together and I can deduce. Oh, right. That explains. You know, I saw that. Well, this jacket was missing from here. I left it here. I saw him wearing that exact jacket. It meant he must have been here. You understand? Now, this, obviously I didn't see him here, but I can deduce that, and then you can make inductions as well. You can take loads of, so for example, I don't know, like I've boiled water, it's boiled here. Or let's just say, I don't know, like every crow I've seen, like, is black. So now I make an induction, okay, so by principle, all crows are black. Now this is a piece of knowledge that I've arrived at by, you know, looking at different informations and drawing it together and drawing a principle. So there's different ways on how you can arrive at knowledge. And the fancy term for this is epistemology. And so now, during this discussion in Aqidah, they discussed something called Tawatur. They said, well, Tawatur is one way you can acquire knowledge. You can say, well, how do you know China exists? In the past, they would say, well, I know because it's common knowledge. Everybody knows it. Duh. They wouldn't have made it up just to trick me. They go, well, fine. Common knowledge will accept as a means of knowledge. You see. So this is where the discussion of Tawatur enters. Now, why was this important? This was important in the sense of how do we, using our knowledge, arrive at God? And argue, is there a God? Isn't there a God? How do we argue with evidences? Because people will say, well, I know this, well, what is knowledge anyway? And that's why you discuss epistemology. So I just want to clarify the backdrop to where this comes in. Then along comes Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, who's a great hadith scholar, but, you know, allegedly he used to now and then have a little drink. I don't know if that's true, but some of the Hanafis have mentioned that he was like that. Zahid al-Kawthari says that he would like his occasional. But he was a great scholar of hadith, legend in hadith. However, I don't know whether the drink part is true, and if that day he'd had a little chalo ho jaye yaar, ho jaye. Right, so he, in his writing his book on hadith, brings in the discussion Tawatur. For no reason. It's nothing to do with hadith. The question was, look, how do we know that the Prophet, the discussion of hadith was, how do you, okay, the Prophet said this, but how do you know the Prophet said it? And somebody said, well, I know because he told me, and he told him, And he told him. He said, well, okay, that's fine. Say, but they could be wrong. True, they could be. Oh, but what if it was common knowledge that the Prophet said something? Say, well, sure. If it's common knowledge, it's Mutawatir. It's like China, like they couldn't have all been lying about that. So, okay, so he puts this topic in as a discussion in Usul Hadith, thereby opening a can of worms, ain't even the word actually, opening Pandora's box to a calamity that would come later on. So what happened from here, some scholars started to say, we've found Mutawatir Hadith. So you're like, what on earth are you on about? So they've started to say, well, so you have some people, so for example, one of the revolutionaries of Usul Hadith, Ibn Salah, to be fair to him, he writes in his Muqaddimah that actually Mutawatir Hadith is very unlikely to ever exist in Hadith. He says it's very unlikely. He's quite dismissive of it. But Ibn Hajar, by his time, he says, what are you talking about? Mutawatir, okay, how many people, common knowledge, like if I asked you, how many people do you need to tell you to believe in something? So these people had this discussion in the past, and they wrote 40 people, and then somebody said 20 people, and somebody said 12, and somebody said 10, somebody said 5, somebody said 4. So they started writing these down in the books. Oh, this is, for it to be common knowledge, at least this many people must say. So Ibn Hajar is like he caused havoc in our tradition by actually pushing this thing of, actually, of course, a hadith can be mutawatir. How can it be mutawatir? 10 people say it's fine, alhamdulillah, it's impossible to now be a lie. And you think, whoa, hold your horses, mate. Why is that impossible for 10 people to get it wrong? So this whole discussion of mutawatir is nonsensical. This is why I asked these people, show me in the early scholars anybody who ever spoke of it. Imam Malik, Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Abu Dawood, these great scholars, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, and in their times, you've got who? Ibn Hibban, who has his great hadith book, Ibn Hibban does. He's one of the major scholars of that era of hadith collection. What does he actually say? He says there is no such thing as mutawatir hadith. All hadith is isolated narrations. That means one person heard it from the Prophet, from him usually just one person, maybe 2 people, and that's how it works. Even if you get multiple one people, but it is still just an isolated narration. So he said that. You had Abu Bakr al-Hazmi endorsing his statement. You had Ibn Abi Dam endorsing his statement. These were all scholars saying, look, there is no such thing as mutawatir. Even Imam Shatibi saying that, look, this is a fruitless discussion. It really didn't belong in Usul Hadith at all. So today, what happened is the scholars, anything they wanted to push, they just started to claim the Hadith is mutawatir. Okay, like, oh yeah, this is mutawatir. Why? Because I found a few different chains of it. Oh yeah. Now you can't deny it's haram to deny. It's kufr to deny. So, look, to understand all of this, just pause the discussion for a moment. Pause the discussion for a moment and just understand one simple thing. How many people does it take for you to hear to think that something is true? How many people? Like, you just think about that. Like, if I told you you're about to receive some news, how many people must tell you for you to believe it's true? If it was simply people telling, not evidence, not like here's video footage, how many people must it take? You think about it. If 5 people told you something, do you believe that must certainly categorically now be true? There is no way on earth that can be anything other than because 5 people have told me. What if 20 people told you? Must it categorically now be true? Can it still not be wrong? Now, if you just think about this, the whole discussion opens up in front of you. In all honesty, you wouldn't accept even 20 people as certainty. Like, you'll accept it as overwhelmingly, sure, that's convincing. It's convincing, it's not certainty. Like the way, you don't need convincing that China exists. You're not like, you know what, yeah, I'm convinced it, no, that's like, to you, it's as plain as day that China does exist, that these countries do exist. Because that is absolute common knowledge. So you just think about this discussion on Tawatur. What would it take, what number would it take for you as an individual to believe that something can't even have 1% doubt? And the truth is, that is a discussion in and of itself, that can you even have certain knowledge, but perceptibly certain, what would it take? And I would say that I wouldn't accept even if 20 people told. I think that would be good. I'd be like, oh wow, I'm definitely, wow, I'm being convinced here because there's a lot of people said it, but I want some evidence. I want to check something out for myself. I don't want to just, 20 people said it doesn't mean it. It's impossible for it to be an error. So I hope that sheds some light. And what's happened is, unfortunately, sectarianism has entered the game, and scholars have hijacked this discussion, and anything they want to push, they just call it Mutawatir. It's like, oh, Mutawatir. It's like, no, it isn't. This is not Mutawatir, mate. And then they took it a step further and said, because we're calling it Mutawatir, it doesn't even matter. It does not even matter if all those chains were weak. This is what Ibn Hajar writes. Ibn Hajar says, even if all the chains are totally weak. Some of them say they don't even need to be Muslim. They don't even need to be this. And then you say, well, okay, if all that be true, how come you don't accept the Mutawatir of the Shia? Because they don't need to even, because they're Shia, at least they're Muslim. Now, you yourself said the chains could be weak. You just said so many people have to say. Why don't you accept the Mutawatir narrations of the Shia? So, you don't, Kafir. So, look, so you contradict yourself. So people are using this as a tool for manipulation, right? So, if you hear this thing, people say if you go against Mutawatir, you're not a Muslim anymore. That stuff is nonsense. This kind of emotional blackmail is so outdated, and it's actually false as far as the evidence is concerned. So guys, I just thought I wanted to share that. I think we'll leave it with that. Is there anything somebody's saying about Mufti? Is there something that's happened? Share some. Is there something you'd like me to quickly make a mention of? Any interesting points? Anything that's kind of gone down? If not, we can wrap this up. Right. Somebody's saying, why did ulama accept used hadith unless proven otherwise? What? Accepted used hadith in fiqh unless... I don't understand the question. So, right, somebody said, if you follow this, this means that you might as well just reject all hadith. No, that's not true. Hadith, like I said, you follow the three principles. Most people do not learn Islam through hadith anyway. They learn it through the living tradition that they already have. Right, so this is nonsense. It's a myth that you learnt Islam by sitting down and opening hadith books. No, you did not, mate. You learnt Islam, usually it's just taught en masse as part of the living tradition from father to child. And that from parent to child, that is how Islam is taught. And it still is taught like that's how most people acquire Islam. The rest is an academic study. Now we have books of fiqh that teach you what the rulings already are, which are already based on the sunnah. And the hadith books, the three principles, so long as it doesn't go against reason, doesn't clash with the Quran, and doesn't uproot an Islamic principle. ما لم يبين المعقول ولم يخالف المنقول ولم يناقض الأصول. These principles were laid down by the great ulama of hadith themselves. Right, so okay, people, let's call this a wrap. I think there's, whoa, is that the time? Quite a bit we've discussed today. People, as always, you've been awesome. Some people did say about Mufti Masala. Well, let's just, there's been so many tragedies this week. Let's not just tear somebody else. Let's not just take somebody apart for no reason. But what you can do is, if there is any interesting gupshup, then you can message me, reach out to me with anything worth discussing, worth doing a bit of the Mufti Masala on, and I'll definitely will chat about it. But other than that, I can't really think of any kind of masala really that's coming to my mind. People do send me all kinds of stuff. They send me all kinds of, hey, well, check this out, check this out. I get all these articles, I get everything. Some of them from the most bizarre to, but if there's anything interesting, do give me a shout. Is Dr. Mansoor in the house? If he is, ahlan wa sahlan, people. Dr. Mansoor is an awesome scholar based in Cardiff. Very enlightened and in tune with current day issues. Do reach out to him. Right, so people, let's call this a wrap. Oh, I was going to say something interesting that, let's leave it till next week, inshallah. Guys, take very good care of yourselves, inshallah. Any issues, reach out to me. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. And alright, people, alright. Over and out. And that, by the way, I do that to provoke people even more. I had somebody say, why do you do that? It's a devil sign. A devil sign. And you think, well, did the devil come himself and teach you that's his sign? Talk about blind following. The devil sign, the devil. Ooh. Anyway, guys, have an awesome time. Assalamu alaikum.